30 seconds by my watch, minute over by that clock, but I know my watch is GPS, so. Can y'all hear me? Because I'm not hearing it very well, so can y'all hear me with this position where it's at? No? Okay. Is that better? Seems like it's way too close to my chin. Brian, can you turn that up, please? Yeah. Say again.
Keep talking.
Brian, is it up a little bit more?
It'll get better when I close the doors.
Okay, okay. All right. Brian, are we set up for me to be able to use this now? As always, I like PowerPoints. Welcome. We are going to be talking. Well, first off, those of you who don't know me, most of you should. Justin Hatton. I have been teaching the 3rd through 5th graders, technically I guess now 4th through 6th graders, ever since we started classes back up on Sundays. I've really enjoyed teaching that class. Okay, I think I hear it coming up. So if it's too loud now, is it too loud? Just right? Okay. I've really enjoyed teaching that class, and actually, I saw Greg somewhere, but Ralph Fair, you have the mic, Mac? Perfect. Mike has the mic if you need it. But Ralph Fair once told me, you know, teaching adult class is good, but teaching a kids class is really good because they're learning. And I've taught adult classes before, but when I went in there and started working with my boys and Sam and Layla and Kiana, it was really great to see them learn. And over the course of several years, as I've been teaching them, remember, which I think is very important, right? And I hope as y'all approach this class, you're not here just to learn. That's a part of it. But if in 3 months and really 6 months and a year, what we discuss in here, we don't remember, we have failed ourselves. We have wasted our time. And I don't like to waste my time. So as we approach this class, how did these people make choices and decisions? I hope you're taking notes in whatever way you need to take notes in, whether that's written, mental, which for me is not good. I hope you're thinking, how can I use this in my life? And not just sit here and be, if you will, entertained with some good Bible stories, because I don't want to do that. And I don't think we're going to do that. I'm looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have as we learn how we all make choices and decisions. All right. If you see this, can anybody think of a poem that this might bring to mind? What was it?
Which path am I going to take?
Okay. The Road Not Taken. The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. So I'm going to read this to y'all. Y'all might need the mic for me just so I can hear. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood. Notice how it's yellow wood? I had to look for that picture just to find that. And sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as far that the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how a way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. All right, question, and Mike, get ready to walk around. What are y'all's thoughts about this poem? What's your interpretation? And I'll be quiet until somebody says something.
So if I understood, he took the path that is less traveled. It is difficult to do that because we want what is familiar. We want some knowledge. There's a major event happening in our life, maybe a surgery, so we talk to people who've had a similar surgery to get much information. We make decisions in our life based off of so many different things. But to sit there and do what I think is the best for me, not necessarily what others have chosen, is very important. You think about your Christian life. When we are faced with decisions, and we try to teach our children this, that just because our friend wants to build a fire in the woods, it may not be the best decision to do, even though they try to take as much precaution as they can from spreading the fire.
He's talking about our boys, by the way.
And so, at some point in time, we have to do what is right, not necessarily what is popular.
Mm-hmm. I saw Stephen. We'll get Stephen, and we'll get him, and then we'll get Miss Weatherford too. So Stephen's next.
In the second piece there, it says a better claim, and I think many of our minds may go to better claim for ourselves. But the very next line says it because it was Gracian wanted where. Essentially, he didn't make the decision so much, at least at this point in the poem, based on what he wanted as much as the path was standing there ready to be trodden on. So it was almost like he thought of the path going, it needed somewhere. It needed me.
Mm-hmm.
In our own Christian word, it tells us not to follow the path of the world. And that path is so easy. That's the reason it's worn down. It's easy to go that way. But yet somebody did make the path that is less traveled. So it's got to go somewhere. And if we follow our heart, maybe we'll find a better destination than what if we go with the flow. Only dead fish go with the flow.
All right, we'll get Miss Weatherford, and then that'll be it. Miss Weatherford, do you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to say, it seems like
Yeah, Mike.
the person who wrote the poem seems like he liked the adventure a little bit because he's taking the path that not too many people are taking, and that he has a brave heart. So sometimes that's it's not the easiest path, but it's very interesting.
So there's several different interpretations to this poem. What's the poem called? Is it called The Path Less Traveled? What's it called? The Road Not Taken. He's not focusing, the title of the poem is not focused on, I took a less traveled road. It's, what about that other path I didn't take? And if you read through it, let me read some of the words. Looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair. And he says, hey, perhaps it had the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay. So some people look at this poem, and I appreciate when somebody really makes a poem that has multiple interpretations, it really speaks more to you. Some people will say Frost is making a poem of a guy who many, many years after he's made a decision, he looks back upon that decision and he justifies the decision from the vantage point of having already made it. Hey, really, to be honest, both of those roads were about the same. That's what he's saying. And I took one that I'm going to say, even look at this. He says, I shall be telling this with a sigh. Now, we always say, well, he took the road less traveled, and that has made all the difference. That must be good. Then why is he saying, I shall be saying this with a sigh? Did he want to take the road not traveled? I don't know. When he was there in that moment, and he had a choice to make, a decision to take, he is looking back here hindsight and saying, oh, I see a series of events and progressions and a methodology that I used to make a choice. But did he really in that moment? I don't know. We need to be aware of how we individually and how we collectively make choices. I think we could all agree to that, right? And that's what I hope we are going to do with this class. Now, every choice that you make and every decision that you take, is it going to lead completely opposite directions? Y'all don't, okay, thank you. Head nods. I appreciate when I see people listening and saying this or that. It gives me feedback. No. But, you know, when we don't take the time to think about how do I make a decision, how do I make a choice, and how do I have to interact with others who make decisions and choices in different ways, we're going to have a pretty difficult time in our lives. All right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
But you must have a destination in mind to start with. When you reach this point in the road, you got to have a destination. You got, okay, this road goes to Lufkin. This road goes to Diboll. Now, I can get to Lufkin by going through Diboll, but that's a long ways around. Mm-hmm. So you got to have a destination, and you have to figure out what you're doing in your life. And it's like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. She had only one road to follow, and she got lost and had to ask for directions. You know, so you've got to have a destination.
That's right. Later, one of the articles that we'll talk about when it comes to what's the difference between a choice and a difference, it's going to kind of talk about purpose. This may be one thing I would say, purpose, okay? So y'all know I'm big about purpose and agenda, all right? So I propose the following as our purpose for this class, and if I would like for y'all to read it, if y'all agree to it, that's going to be our purpose. If we start getting off tangents on anything, we're going to go back and say, what's the purpose for our class so we can actually have a discussion based on it. That purpose, the proposed purpose, facilitate a sharing amongst ourselves of how selected Bible characters and we ourselves today consider the choices and decisions we make. Okay? Is everybody cool with that purpose? Stephen? All right, Stephen gave me the heads up. Mike gave me the head nod, yes. And I appreciate that because I want to tell y'all something. After I put this back on. There we go. Okay. I have learned this material. I've practiced this material for years. Okay. I've not really learned anything new as I've prepared this. That's why I come to you guys, because I want y'all to learn and take away, but I need to do the same from y'all. I want to know, how do you make a decision? How do you make a choice? In fact, the pre-class surveys, I got two ideas from two individuals, one of whom normally does not speak up in these adult classes. I was like, oh, I'm already learning something new. So I don't want to be just a facilitator broadcasting out, here's how to do it. I need y'all to broadcast out, and I receive how y'all do it so I can learn something that might help me in my own walk. All right, so this will be our proposed purpose. Next time you see this, in fact, I will mark it off here. It will say purpose. All right? Agenda. Going wrong ways. We're going to have a brief outline about the character. I will let you know who next week's character is. But for the brevity of time, we will not go back and necessarily talk over everything about that person. I'm just going to have to make some assumptions. Today we'll be talking about Daniel. I'm not going to describe necessarily Meshach. Thank y'all. I'm a little nervous, so I'm going to forget some things. I'm not going to describe them all in the fire. I'm just going to assume you know it. But if I tell you who we're going to talk about next week, please go back, study on that individual. Since I have spent more time preparing for this class, my ask is that I will go through my points first, okay? So we can make sure we're going to hit them. And then we're going to open it up for anything else that you guys realize about these people and the choices and the decisions that they've had to make, all right? Now, obviously, if I've told you next week's character and you've had a chance to go back and study on that character, then you too will be prepared when you come to class to make your points. Also, I'm going to give y'all, not only am I going to tell you the character, but I'm going to try to tell you, here's the points I will make about next week's character as well. So you kind of already have that, those thoughts being primed in your head. That sound good? Everybody good with that agenda? Thank y'all. Man, I feel a little nervous. It's been like 6 years since I've been up here. And if I walk back and forth, I apologize. That's how I'm burning off energy. I apologize if it's a distraction. Maybe by the second week, I'll be good to go. All right, here are our characters. Daniel, Esther, Joseph, which I am so glad they're the top three, because when I think of anybody and people who have to make some difficult decisions, these are the three I always go to, especially Esther, and we'll explain that if we get to her next week. Everett's taking some pictures so he can be prepared. If y'all want to do the same, I'll leave that up there for a moment for y'all. Okay, disclaimers. Y'all know I'm also big about that. It's like a syllabus. I'm not going to try to constrain a character per week. Hopefully today we'll get to Daniel. If we have to go into Daniel a little bit next week, that's fine. If we do 2 characters in a week, we'll go. Okay? So I'm not going to try to constrain us to making sure we hit things. Based on how the Romans class went, it doesn't seem you guys are not agreeable to that. You know, we didn't finish Romans, and most time we don't finish our books, so I think y'all are going to be open to just let the discussion flow through. Okay, this is a big one. I don't want our purpose to necessarily be at arriving at a right choice or decision. Most of us in here have been Christians for a long time. I don't need to repeat necessarily what you all can read on your own or what you've known or what we've known collectively. What I do want to talk about, how do we arrive at those decisions and choices, especially in matters of expediency? Okay? I think it's pretty obvious there are decisions and choices that we all agree to, but there are also, even in this congregation, that we disagree about. And we recognize they are expediency. So let's understand, how did you arrive at that? I want you to share your processes for making choices and decisions, okay? I'm not actually going to share mine until maybe the end of the class, because I don't want people to use it and say, okay, this is going to be how the class needs to be. This is how we need to make decisions. I want to hear from y'all before I share mine, okay? Some people, would y'all agree, people make decisions and choices in different ways? Everybody agree? I don't see any head nods, no? Okay. If somebody is sharing, let's be respectful. If they come up and say, I follow my heart, okay? Now, I know we can't always follow our heart, but some people more so do so more than others. Between me and Heather, who do you think follows her heart more often?
Justin.
Not me. You know, be respectful of that. That is how they don't do. Please just don't come in and say, well, that's wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think that's going to happen, but let's keep that, make sure that it's at the forefront of our minds. We also need to recognize what works for one may not work for another, okay? When I make decisions and choices, feelings, sure, put them aside. If I need to consider feelings, especially when I'm dealing with people, I use my consultant, Heather, to say, hey, here's what I'm thinking is going to happen. How do you think people would feel, right? But I use numbers and plans That is what works for me. Heather uses what works for her. You use what works for you. Also, we had a pre-class survey, the end of the quarter feedback survey. I will offer that as I always do. I love to learn how I can do things right, or better rather, I would say better. My ask, and I'll say this again when we get to the end of the quarter, I appreciate when people tell me good job. I don't really want to hear that because it doesn't help me improve. I want to hear, hey, you moved around too much. You took a sip of water too much. If that's a distraction, let me know. There may not be anything I can do with it. Like I said, I'll try to account for it. Justin, maybe your classes weren't structured, or maybe they were too structured, right? Please, that's the things I ask for, so I can improve in how I am facilitating learning and discussion for you and for us. I did want to go back and talk a little points 2 and 3. I want to use some biblical examples why I think sometimes there's not a right choice. You know, we say matters of expediency. And when we say matters of expediency, we'll say, oh, songbooks or using a pitch pipe is a matter of expediency, but it's not a musical instrument. Or worshiping at this time, worshiping at that time. But there's a lot more to it than that, and we even see it in the Bible. Acts 16:3, Timothy. Timothy is born to a Gentile father, Jewish mother, but he is not circumcised. If you read through Acts 16, verse 3, Paul takes Timothy and he has Timothy circumcised. Now, if I recall in Romans, which we just studied, what did Paul say about circumcision? It avails nothing, right? Now, the Bible, those of you who are turning to Acts 16:3, what does the text say why Paul had Timothy circumcised? Somebody read it. Mike's pulling it up.
Paul wanted Timothy to accompany him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in those places, for they all knew that his father was a Greek.
Because of the Jews in the places. Did Timothy need to be circumcised? For scriptural reasons? No. Patricia says no. Why was he circumcised on account of the Jews? Why? Open question.
Make him more acceptable.
Influence, make them more acceptable. That's right. Okay. I've always wondered, how did they know that another guy was circumcised? How about Paul? In Acts 21, here's Paul, an apostle to the Gentiles. He says, sacrifices mean nothing, circumcision means nothing, but he gets to Jerusalem, and after the third missionary journey, and the elders there say, hey, everybody has heard you've been teaching to the Gentiles, so we need you to keep the peace. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to take a vow with these other guys that we've had take a vow over here. This is in Acts 21, 17 through 26. And we want you to have the appearance of keeping the law so you can appease the Jews. It says that. I thought the Old Testament law was nailed to the cross. We don't need to follow it anymore. Why is Paul following it? Mike.
Justin, Paul also says, I have become all things to all men so that by all means I might win some.
I didn't have that in my notes, but you're right, Mike. You know, Paul is doing what he can to gain influence. In Paul's case, you know, I'm going to be honest, sometimes we can step back and say, well, this is right, this is right, this is right. Paul's looking like, I get that, that's right, but I need to do this to save these people. And I wonder if we take that same attitude sometimes. I was very happy to see several people in the pre-class surveys mention Romans 14, 1 through 23. Romans 14, 1 through 23 basically talks about it is not wrong to eat meat offered to idols, but for brethren, weaker brethren it calls it there, who to them that is wrong, then it is wrong. And we should not put a stumbling block in front of them. So what you're telling me is there are some things that are To me, not wrong, but perhaps to Bill, they can be because it's a stumbling block to him. You know, sometimes we like to put everything right or wrong, black and white, and there are things like that, right? Gospel plan of salvation, definitely wholeheartedly. You cannot read through Acts and not come away understanding what you need to do there. But there are some other things that we need to understand. It's wrong for you, perhaps right for me. Here's a good example. Everybody raise your Bible real quick. Raise your Bible real high so I can see them. Okay. Look around real quick. Keep them up. Look at how many, if you will, physical Bibles we have. Look at how many phone Bibles we have. I didn't say put them down. Go ahead. I'm just kidding. You know, is it wrong to use either one or right? No. For me, I'm raising a family. The choices, I have made a choice to make sure my kids know what I'm doing. Yes, sir.
But even you look around at the different Bibles, a physical Bible as opposed to an electronic Bible. But we get more into, well, I use King James Version. That's the only one that can be used because that's the one Jesus used. And, and like my electronic Bible here, I've got like 40 different versions of the Bible. I can look up
Yes, sir.
the original meaning to all the way down to some far-fetched left field meaning.
Well, I'm glad you say that. Right now, in my point of life, I'm raising children. Now, they would probably understand when I'm using this phone, I'm not on Facebook. They would probably understand that now, but when they were younger, what does a phone mean to them? Games, social media. Well, not social media when they were younger and still not now, but games. They don't know. I want to make it very clear to my children. Guess what I have in my hand and guess what I'm looking at? For me right now, when my children are around, especially when they're younger, this was wrong. Now, you guys, Rick, sorry. If I don't have children around, I'll still use this just because I like the feel, but I'll also have it pulled up to the Bible app because I'm looking at the Greek words and I'm looking at the commentary at the same time. It's very interesting. You know, we talk about situational ethics, and I don't think entirely we can say, oh, whatever makes you feel good and in every situation it's right or wrong. But I think we should be a little bit more aware of things like this and really think through and understand and have discussions, right? I don't know if anybody before this point has thought about the electronic versus the physical Bible and is one right or wrong at any point during your life, okay? Let's move on because we're never going to get to Daniel. I keep going backwards, y'all. I'm not going down the road, I'm going backwards. What are choices and decisions? So I'm going to allow just a few minutes here, and then we'll try to get into the articles. Mike, please.
Justin, when you put out that pre-class survey, I did not fill it out because I couldn't get past the first question. And it didn't dawn on me in my mind until just a little bit ago in the middle of your class, in my mind, what the difference between a choice and a decision is. And the only way I can explain that in my mind is 30 years ago, I made a decision not to drink alcohol. That was a decision. Today it's a choice. That's the way I look at that.
Very interesting. I'm going to have to think about that one. And I'll explain why in a moment as we talk about some of these articles and how they would say choice comes before decision. Go ahead, Paul.
This is probably not going the direction you want to go.
We'll go back to the purpose of the class, don't worry.
But, you know, I got to thinking about how we come up with choices and decisions and all that, and I'm a firm believer that a lot of the choices I make today at 58 is based off of probably 50 years of life. I'm not going to count the first 8 years. But the people I've been around, my parents, my influence, my military, everything that I've endured in life has made me or allowed me to come to different decisions that I've come to. So our environment has a profound effect. Thinking about whether you use King James or NIV, who influenced you? What kind of group were you around? Were you with such a conservative group that now you want to rebel and use the NIV or whatever version? And so that has a profound effect on how we come to some of our choices.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else before I go into, I don't want to call them answers, but more discussion from the articles that we'll read. Yes, sir, Mr. Boland.
Well, I think we all have a lot of choices in life, but the decisions that we make about those choices also come with consequences. And we need to think not only how they might affect us, but how to affect others around us.
You bring up something very interesting. I want to say this is one thing I saw from some of the pre-class surveys. Choices are the options that we have, and the decision is the selection of that option. And that's certainly one way to look at it. The articles that we'll read about talk about how we make choices, and we also make decisions. Under the view that I got from some of you, we're not making choices. Choices are simply the options that we have, and every time we make a decision to select that option. Okay? Let's go on. I'm going to read 2 articles. I think it's clear. Choices and decisions are not the same thing. And you might say, well, okay, just play on words. And it may be to you. Again, what works for you, works for you. Keep at it. All right? If we say anything here that helps you say, oh, you know what? I've been having a problem understanding how to make decisions because I've been classifying them as choices. I hope that helps you. I'm glad we could help. Decision is defined as a conclusion or resolution reached after consideration. I'm an engineer. I make decisions based on numbers. Okay? There's no, hey, we could do this or that. It's boom. Okay, that's the most effective decision we can make right now. Choice is an act of selecting or making a decision when faced with 2 or more possibilities. And I know y'all probably can't read the fine print. I do have this and can share it with you, guys, but that's the article that has talked about this. We have another article from John Mertz down here for this piece. And what he talks about is with decision is more of a process orientation, meaning we are going through analysis and steps to eliminate or cut off options. In fact, the word decide comes from, I now can't remember if it's Greek or not. Actually, let me just go to the article. Instead of going from memory, let's look at the article. If I can find it. Okay, I can't find it. But he talks about the word decision actually comes from another word which means to cut. You're basically saying, I have made my decision and that's final. Okay? That is no longer under consideration. We are going this route. Whereas a choice, that word is coming from okay, if I remember decision, choice comes from a word to mean to perceive, okay? You're not necessarily so clear cut and dry as you are with a decision. You're perceiving, okay, this might be the right choice. Let me show some other things from the articles. Actually, no, I don't have them on the slides. I'm just going to have to read them off. So here, Patricia and Russell, again, I can share these articles with you if you're interested. Choice is a silent agreement between you and God, however you view your creation. These are not members of the church, so of course I'm using from their frame of reference. Of course, take it as into our frame of reference. Choice is the exercising of agency, meaning the use of free will to make choices in counsel with your Creator to shape one's life. Decisions are the actions and or the effects of choices that are made, whether we are consciously or unconsciously aware of them. A good example she uses, I choose happiness. If I go into a situation, I'm deciding to allow myself to be happy. I'm deciding here's something good. if I choose sadness, if I'm always going to be gloom, and I know this from all experience on both sides, then what am I going to find? And what am I going to decide to act out as? Gloomy, sad. Here are some things that she gives. 8 principles, actually 9 principles. Choice is a precursor to a decision, not the result of a decision. Choice is of spirit. Decisions are of the ego, which means physical. Choice is personal. Decisions are public. You know, you don't have to say, I choose, you know, but your decisions, people are going to know you've made the decision to do this or not do this. Choice is the absence of judgment, reason, or belief. Not sure quite if I would agree with that one. Decisions are reason-based and require explanations. Choosing is simple, deciding is complex. Choice is a revelation, decisions are made, in which case she means you really don't make a choice, it's more just revealed to you. So again, not quite sure. We don't have to agree with everything she gives here. Choice is instantaneous, decisions are time-based. Choice inspires and nurtures action, decision propels action, but then starves it. And choice is a promise fulfilled, decisions are wishes hoped for, okay? And just for the brevity of time, we're going to keep going through. Again, I will share this with you with the URL so you can take a look. I do want to look at the John Mertz article. We've already talked a little bit about it. With decision is more of a process orientation. I follow a particular process to arrive at a decision. With choice, it is more of a mindset approach. I approach life looking for the good, okay? You know those people who they say, I've never met strangers, just friends I don't know yet? I'm not one of those people, by the way. But a person who has that attitude, what are they deciding upon? They're going to make decisions of, how can I connect with this person, right? John Mertz also has another article, and I think this has some good examples. He says, and I wish I had put it on the chart, maybe I can do that next time. He says a lot of times people have problems with, because people will confuse your choices with your decisions, they have analysis paralysis. Y'all ever heard that term? Stephen, surely you have. There's so many decisions, how do I choose, right? Well, he said if you go back to your choices and say, here is the choice I'm selecting, then that actually narrows your decisions to just ones that align to that choice. For example, how many cereals, when you go down the cereal aisle, are there? A lot. Now, he gives the example of if your choice is to live a healthy lifestyle, how many cereals are you going to select now? Just a few, okay? I know for myself, growing up, well, not growing up, but when Heather and I were first married, it was get it as cheap as you can. So that was my choice, to live frugally. The decision was, what's the cheapest one? Ooh, it's going to taste like cardboard, but that dollar saved is going to be nice, okay? He talks about actually I'm going through the process of buying a truck right now. After 23 years with my truck, I'm still keeping her, but I have narrowed it down through my choices. I want a safe vehicle that my family can ride. I want a vehicle that rides comfortably. And I want a vehicle that has certain particular electronic features. Well, that's cut off a good chunk of the trucks out there. And now I'm down to selecting one of these 3 brands, right? So y'all see how choices can drive our decisions. And even the choices we make can change throughout life. Before I met Heather, if I were buying a truck, what would I go for? I don't care if it's unsafe. Yeah, I don't care if it's not safe, I'll say it that way. It needs to be as cheap as possible. Now I have a family. Is cheap going to be possible anymore? I'm not living frugally anymore. I want safety. Heather would probably disagree with my frugal statement.
You're not living as frugally.
Thank you, Mike. But Heather, you can keep doing so, please. But as a young couple grows, the choices that they have made are changing. And then the decisions that they make as a result also change too. Just like Which one? Which one? At some point in my life, I'll probably entirely go back to this one because now I don't have kids with me anymore, right? By that point, we'll probably even have them in our eyeballs to where you can pull it up, and then nobody will know if you're watching the game or not. But our choices and decisions can change. Let's see. Okay, we got 5 minutes. So I know y'all probably can't read that, but it basically goes through different items. What's the difference between decision making and choice creating? It's very interesting they use that word, choice creating. From what I understand on this article, with respect to a decision, you kind of know the options, right? You're just down selecting from the options. With a choice, you may not necessarily see the right choice at the time. So that's why they call it choice creating, because you get together with other people. Stephen Covey. Everybody heard of Stephen Covey? 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? I see 2 head nods so far. Well, that's good. Okay, a few more. He calls it the third alternative. I come with my choice or option. You come with yours. We get together. We find that third alternative, right? So it could be a little bit of that, choice creating. But I'm not going to read these to you guys because I do want to finish up our intro. Looks like we will not get to Daniel today. So we will hurry up through this, and I will share the slides with y'all if y'all wish for them. All right. Class questions. So the pre-class surveys, you guys filled this out, some of y'all. And I appreciate those of you who have asked to be on my do not call, because I will be calling upon others who normally don't speak in this class. And I'm going to do so now. Mark, I'm curious if you'll share with us, please. What's your choice and decision-making process? I think I know it, but I want to hear it from you to see how well do I think I know yours.
Well, you know, I'm like you in the engineering world, so, you know, I go by numbers and I do a lot of analysis to determine what the choices are. And then based on those choices and the analysis, I determine which decision I need to make. So,
Pretty clear, cut, and dry.
Right.
I would add to that sometimes you may be stronger in making decisions than choices, right? If I had to put where I'm at, it'd probably be I can really make decisions very clear, very objective. Heather would probably be better at making choices, right? So thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. And you are done for the rest of the class. If anybody else does not want to be called upon, you may need to make sure your name is on this yellow piece of paper, okay? I will call upon people throughout the year. The intent there is the pre-class surveys. I actually had a person, like I mentioned earlier, she normally does not speak up in the class, and yet I gained some very good knowledge, and we'll try to share it throughout the year, semester, class, not the year. I will not be teaching for a whole year. But normally, I would not hear her say that in class. How can I learn from you if you're not going to speak up? So I'm hoping to encourage that. Some people have said, I normally don't want to, but I will for this class, okay? So I appreciate those of you who want to try, but if some are deathly afraid, please make sure your name is on here. Is there anybody else who wants to share their choice and decision process? All righty. We'll not do this, but I'm sorry, Stephen, sorry.
I'm not exactly going to answer that question, but I would like to follow up with a concept. When you think about the numbers, and Justin, obviously you and I's heads work pretty similar, just like Mark's.
Uh-oh.
What?
Nothing. Sorry.
Justin. We also have to recognize that the categories, and I don't know, there's probably a better term, the categories by which you're looking for numbers and the like are different per person. Mm-hmm. we could list them as priorities in the decision or priorities in the choice. Maybe that's a better approach. But those are different. You may be looking for what you list off: safety, fit a family. Someone else may be looking at able to go off-roading really well or drive up the side of a mountain. Someone else may be looking at better gas mileage. Like the categories by which we all make decisions are all different, which kind of also tends to point towards the right, wrong may not be a factor as much.
Right. That's a good point. We'll close up. I want to say these are 3 other questions that I hope we will talk. If you feel comfortable and anybody wants to talk about a time, a specific example in which their decision-making or choice-creating process led to good results, we'd love to hear them. But and this is something we don't often talk about in the church. If anybody had, and I appreciate Mike kind of speaking to this earlier, when's the time that you used that process and it led to bad results? Yeah, that's probably, you could just as much learn from that as you can the good, right? And then if there's any time when we talk about any examples of what was right or wrong for you, that was also wrong or right for another. And, this is one such example that we've given. All right. Y'all take a moment. We're not going to get into Daniel today, but as per the thing that I want to do, I will tell you who we're going to talk about the next week, and I will give you the point. So for Daniel, we're going to see a good example of where he and his companions make a choice, and then they have a decision that they make based on that choice. We're going to consider choosing our friends and influences. We're going to look at how the choices and decisions that Daniel especially made, how they were understood by kings. Specifically King Darius, because King Darius says something to Daniel that I find very surprising as he's putting Daniel into the lion's den. So go back and look at that. But our decisions and choices, even our godly ones, can be understood by others who do not follow God. Choosing to follow God lends towards a consistent decision-making process. And then, if you go back and look at King Darius again, the unforeseen impact of our choices and decisions. We need to make sure we understand what that impact is. So y'all consider these. Thank y'all to those of you who are taking pics. That's actually a very good idea. Think of your own. When we come to class next week, we'll look at the purpose again. We will cover Daniel. Any questions or comments before we close? Make sure you get your name on the yellow card. I appreciate it. Y'all have a good week.